Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again as we approach episode 300 this week as we talk about the debut album from Canadian thrash band Annihilator. But before we talk all things Canadian thrash, how are you, my friend?
Good. Once we got through all of our studio issues, we're good to go. But we're recording this episode fairly ahead of time, so thankfully it didn't feel like it was too much of an emergency. It's different when we're recording on a Sunday morning and the episode's supposed to go up Sunday night. So we're in good
Horse
shape.
of a different color, as they say.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to this. This should be an interesting conversation. But I spent the bulk of my week when I wasn't listening to Annihilator, listening to all the stuff that I haven't listened to for the better part of, 6 or 8 months from earlier this year. And it was an interesting experience for me. There were certain albums that I listened to that got a lot better with the benefit of hindsight. And then others where I said to myself, what was I thinking? Not that it was bad, but it just didn't hit me the same way I thought it was going to hit me in retrospect. And others were just as good as I remembered them. Have you been having a similar experience?
Yeah, seeing the albums go up and down the list upon re-listen is kind of interesting, but it makes sense because I would listen to an album that came out in February and then I'll listen to an album right after it that came out in October. And, obviously I never listened to those two albums very close together. So it's hard at the time. It was hard to decide which one was better than the other. So that's why, we do this re-listening thing. I think when I have a solid top 25 in mind, I will probably go back and do what you did and listen to it in reverse order and just see if it continues to get better and better as I make my way to the top. I don't think I'll have the time to do that for the top 50, but I feel like for the top 25, which is what we'll focus on in the episode, I'll do that for that. Yeah, it is interesting. It's certain things as we talk about are really depend on mood. If you're not in a great mood and you listen to something, it might not hit the same way or if you're in a great mood and you listen to something just mediocre, it's like Jim Ross calling a good match and makes it great somehow.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the funny thing about it is, and that's why I always say, right, you can kind of jumble a lot of these albums up. What's the difference between 12 and 47? My mood, right? Depending on the day and how it hits you, because you're kind of splitting hairs. For me, I've never been one to say, oh my God, how is this not in somebody's top 5? For me, if it's on the list, it means you enjoyed the album. And yeah, I'm sure that you probably enjoyed 2 more than 50, but at the end of the day, you can throw a lot of them in a hat. I mean,
somebody had an album that was number 1 on their list that I made it about a song and a half through and was like, I'm good. This isn't really my jam. Different strokes. That it's funny when it comes to metal is there's just so many subgenres that depending on what you gravitate towards, lists are going to be different. I mean, even me and you, we cover the same podcast and our lists are pretty different. There's always a handful of things that carry over to both, but in general, and if you start to look at some of the lists that our Patreon members have sent us, those tend to be wildly different as well. And so that should be, I guess by the time this episode drops, we'll have already dropped our bonus episode with we're going to talk about, we're kind of ranking the albums of the year based on our Patreon members. We did that last year and it was kind of cool. So we'll do that again. That would be at this point available as a Patreon bonus episode. And then soon enough we'll talk about our picks and before you know it, it'll be 2026 somehow.
Time flies when you're having fun. Couple of new things I will mention. You had sent me a single. I've not had the chance to listen to it, but I see a lot of chatter about it. Former Dragon Force and now former Skid Row singer ZP Tart has come out with a new single called Dark to Light. This on the heels of the Elisa Whiteglass solo single as well. A lot of singers coming out with solo material now, kind of leaving the bands that they were most known for. What are your thoughts on this new single?
I thought it was pretty good. It was honestly kind of a funny, like comforting to hear his voice again after all this time, because I feel like, since he's been in Dragon Force, I mean, I haven't heard much from him outside of that side band he was in, IMI. I don't know that I really heard much of. Was he singer for Skid Row for a time? Was that?
Yeah, he was there with them for quite a bit, tours and all.
Yeah, never really heard much from that, but I don't know. I saw a lot of people that thought it was good. I've seen people that say it's awful. So, also I looked it up because I never knew how to pronounce his name, but apparently it is ZPT Art. So,
easy for you to say. There you go.
Yeah, I always thought it was like the art, check out ZP's The Art or T Heart, if you will. Because they used to be Dragon Heart, so maybe it was D Heart with T Heart. I don't know. I'm just babbling at this point. But needless to say, I thought the song was pretty good. The AI video notwithstanding, but the song itself was good. So I'd be curious to hear more from what ZP has to offer. And I will add this will probably end up on the first playlist of 2026 after the best of 2025 playlist, obviously, but I'll make sure to throw it on there. I just downloaded it and now I can't find it, so that's fun.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it'll come back to you at some point. Speaking of singers, again, branching out and doing their own thing, Rotting Christ's singer Sakis Tolis has come out with a solo album. I was listening to that this week. 8 tracks, relatively short. I think it's just over 30 minutes in length. And it has his unmistakable vocals, but the music is a little less Rotting Christ and a little more hard rock in places. It was kind of interesting, I have to say. I'll go back to it at least one more time before the end of the year, but an interesting release from him. I think there's definitely something to be said for solo albums where they're not mimicking the band's style that they're most known for, because at that point, just release another album under that moniker, I guess. So nothing too out of the ordinary, but definitely something different from him. And I also spent some time with the new Lord of the Lost album, Opus Noir Volume 2. Interesting listen there as well. These guys continue to put out quality music at a very, very high clip. Have you had a chance to check that out? I know it was on very high. I think it was number 1 on Glenn's list.
I haven't listened to part 2 yet, but I will. I'm planning on listening to it when I go back to part 1 and listen to it as kind of a full opus, I suppose.
There you go.
Two-part opus. I think that's what Glenn did, so I'm just going to follow suit. I don't know that I really feel like differentiating between which one was better than the other. That's to say if it makes my list at all. I think I had it in my top 50, the first one somewhere. So I'll definitely listen to both together for sure.
Nice.
Yeah. And, I hadn't had a chance to listen to it yet. Actually, there's 2 things I want to mention. Epica released a new single called Avatar, the Final Incarnation, which was, I believe, a track that was recorded during their last album sessions that didn't make the cut. I don't know if it was a Japanese bonus track or something initially, but it was released as a single, and I think they released a music video for it as well. But there was something I did get a chance to listen to, which was really fun, which was a collaboration between Visions of Atlantis and War Kings. And they made a song called Pirates and Kings. And it was a nice little throwback to back when Clementine was part of Serenity, because we get to hear Georg and Clementine do kind of a duet together again. So that was kind of cool. It was a fun little song, kind of came out of nowhere and was unexpected. There's a music video for that as well, so I definitely recommend checking that out. So those 3 songs along with the ZP tune were kind of the new singles that came across my desk. I just haven't had a chance to listen to the Epica single yet, but I could definitely recommend the other 2 songs for sure.
I will post the Epica single this week. I like that collaboration as well. I saw War Kings play on 70,000 Tons. It was like the middle of the day. It was 85 degrees in the middle of the Caribbean waters, and they're dressed up with hammers and breastplates and all that. I mean, it was a sight to behold, but they went over well, and I don't know that I'll ever have the chance to see them again. They do some interesting stuff. So cool collaboration there for sure.
I wonder how you get a breastplate through customs. It's interesting.
I was wondering the same thing, unless they bought it in Miami, but something tells me they did not.
Is there an armory on board the ship, or
there may as well be with this crowd? Let me tell you, it was something to behold. But this week I spent the bulk of my time listening to this Annihilator album, which was something I wanted to choose anyway, but something that also had been requested by one or two listeners, and we've got a blurb that I'll read later from Patreon member Charles Florio. I say that all to say Annihilator is kind of an interesting band for me anyway. I had just been purposely, I guess, not checking them out because I was always didn't know where to start. They had such a massive discography, and I guess in many ways no better place to start than the beginning, right? With this, their first album, Alice in Hell. But it was a band that I had heard so many good things of, and I know a lot of thrash fans love them, and they've gone through countless, and I mean countless lineup changes over the years. I won't do a full historical retrospective, as we'll be here all day. I'll focus more on this lineup from their first album. But I know that Jeff Waters was a staple on 70,000 Tons. He often led the all-star jam, if you will, that they have every single year where musicians kind of get together and play a bunch of covers, which some people think it's a little bit too much. I don't mind it for what it is. I think it's kind of interesting and cool to hear bands playing together that you'd never get a chance to see collaborate. So that's kind of cool. But I guess that's a long preamble. And I guess the question I have for you is, how familiar, if at all, were you with Annihilator? I'm sure you've heard of them, but had you ever heard any of their music?
Never. Definitely heard of them for sure. Like, it was just, it's just another one of those iconic band names that you see on battle jackets and hear mentioned, but it just was one of those albums, like, thrash isn't my specialty. And like you said, like, where do you start? I was interested to find out that, Mike Mangini, was a part of Annihilator at one point, shortly, I think a few years after this debut album was released. So that was one of the names in the large personnel list that I recognized. Interesting change between Annihilator and Dream Theater, to say the least. But I think that just based on the name, I was expecting it to be a little bit more extreme and brutal. And so I was like kind of pleasantly surprised that it actually was more of a melodic thrash than kind of just almost like, I consider like that early Anthrax stuff like more of like a punk thrash, where it's not really melodic as much as it is just thrashy. Like, that's it. It's just thrashy. And like, as I said many a times ad nauseum, I tend to gravitate towards like the Megadeths and the classic Metallica albums, where there just happens to be more melodicness that's mixed in with the thrash. And I think that's why those bands kind of stood out and were more popular amongst casual fans, because there was stuff about, a song like, Enter Sandman or Tout Le Monde that like, I think an outside listener who can appreciate like hard rock music would be like, oh, this is, it's the thrash metal band, but it's a little bit more, accessible. And that's kind of how I got into bands like that. And so I tend to gravitate more towards, I think you had said last week, more overkill-esque thrash metal versus, I don't know, like, we've covered two Anthrax albums, and I felt very different about the two, because the one we did with John Bush, The Sound of White Noise, was such a way more melodic, and it could also be I prefer John Bush's vocals is it Charlie? Charlie's the other vocalist.
Yeah, yep.
Charlie Benanti.
Yeah.
So
No. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Now we're gonna have to go back into the archives and talk a little bit about the classic Anthrax lineup. So Charlie Benanti is. So all right, let me go back to the beginning here. Charlie Benanti has been with the band, I think, since the very beginning. He plays the drums. You're thinking of Joey Belladonna on vocals.
Yes, and
the reason I paused is I didn't know where. That's a story for another day. But Charlie Benanti has been with them since 1983, so no surprise there. You're thinking of Belladonna, though.
Yes, thank you. I like John Bush's vocals better, but I also thought that it was a more melodic album, and so
100%. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the albums we covered, I think, were 6 or 7 years apart, but they sounded nothing alike. I mean, nothing alike, right down to the vocals, which are very different as well.
Yeah, and our friend Chris Calabrese has also said to me that like he thinks that I will enjoy Spreading the Disease a bit more, and
I think that's right.
And it's on his list of requests, so we will definitely be getting to that. Probably, I would venture to say at some point in 2026, it seems like would be likely. So anyway, that was just a long way of getting to, this was more of the kind of thrash that I enjoy. And so I found it to be a very easy listening experience. In fact, I gave it one last listen last night, laying in bed with headphones on whilst playing a game on Switch. It was pretty much as cozy as one gets while listening to thrash metal in bed.
Nice. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I had a similar experience as well. It was not as chaotic as I expected it to be. Not that would have been a bad thing. It was just a little different than what I expected. I know Charles, who had made the request, is a huge fan. I just want to read a little bit about what he says. Then I'll fill in some gaps and we can jump into it. He says, I've been a fan of Canada's Annihilator since Alice in Hell back in 1989. It's a great album. The production is notably good, especially when it is considered and compared to its time, and the playing and songwriting are top-notch. Led by band leader, songwriter, and absolutely great guitar player Jeff Waters, Annihilator has had a long and arguably successful career. They're the highest selling metal band to ever come from Canada. The band has released a total of 18 top-notch quality studio albums over the years,
Wow.
Releases that masterfully combine elements of thrash and straight-up metal. They have live releases as well, which are very good. But unfortunately, despite their efforts, success didn't really happen for them in America. Certainly, lineup changes didn't help in that respect either. While this album is not one that I would say is their best work, I do understand why it's widely considered as such. With relatively strong sales, so many great tracks, and enduring affection from longtime fans, it is difficult not to consider this to be their best. My favorite track on the album is hands down Roll You Into the Dirt track, Human Incesticide, so killer. I personally think the album is a solid 8.5 to a 9. The songs are really strong. Alice is a great starting point. I highly recommend you going past Alice and checking out more of the band's full catalog. I am here if needed. Surprisingly, I have them all, or not surprisingly, I guess he has them all.
The only question is, how many of those did he buy at Slip Disc?
Yeah, exactly. That is the question. That is what I want to know. I say that all to say this album came out April 17th, 1989. And I was thinking earlier this week how we've done albums from the Big Four. We've even done some of the German thrash covering Pleasure to Kill and the early Creator sound. Another thing I want to go back to at some point with bands like Destruction and stuff like that. But I think this is one of the few true thrash albums that we've done that are not one of those big hubs of thrash. Canada not really being known as a thrash territory, but this album was really good. And I'll kind of put this out here now. I actually do intend to go back and listen to more from this band, not only checking out some of the other vocalists, but just some of the stuff that they've done in recent years, because I actually liked it a lot more than I expected.
Nice. Yeah, I feel similarly. And it's interesting too, typically we talk about accolades towards the end, but I'll mention them now. Loudwire ranked this the 9th best thrash album not released by the Big Four. VH1 listed the album as one of the greatest thrash debuts. Loudwire also listed the album as the 30th best thrash metal album of all time. And Revolver placed it on their list of 10 criminally underrated 80s thrash albums. So a lot of high praise for this Annihilator debut album. So yeah, and again, like, this is why we do this, because I mean, this is an album not sure I ever would have gotten to had it not been requested by somebody. So as usual, the education is never ending.
Yeah, very, very, very well said. Just for personnel reasons, we talked about Jeff Waters earlier, lead guitar, rhythm guitar. He also does bass on this album, and the bass on this album is fantastic. So you can just see what an accomplished musician he is. Randy Rampage on lead vocals and backing vocals, rest in peace. He would rejoin the band. Well, let me say it this way. This was his first album with the band. He would leave for several years before coming back. I think he passed away in 2018. So a bit of a tribute to him. Ray Hartman on drums, Anthony Greenham on rhythm guitar, and Wayne Darley on bass. But both of those folks, Anthony and Wayne, although in the credits, did not actually play on the album. It was all Jeff Waters, as I mentioned earlier. So with that backdrop, I say we should get into it. It starts with a 1:40 instrumental song, which I found fascinating. I mentioned Rebirth and how it starts with a fantastic opening song before the band just punches you in the face. This was very different in that it doesn't really build up to the first track, but it shows you just how technically sound Jeff Waters is on guitar, and I loved it. It was one of my favorite opening songs, if for no other reason than it just was so different and unexpected. The song is called Crystal Ann, and it's really just a technical classical guitar solo that our friend Brian would have been all over back in 2000 or something like that. Did this open or give you a false sense of what this album was? Because I can't imagine you were expecting it to open this way.
I wasn't expecting it to open this way, but I also wasn't expecting it to continue this way either. But I love I love this as an opening. I think it's just something totally different from the rest of the album, and like you said, it's a kind of a display of technicality here, and it's I love this guitar style, so I thought a really nice way to open things up, and as we say, it kind of gives you a false sense of what's about to happen before the face melting begins, but. I like the way that it transitions from like the acoustic guitar goes out and then the bass comes in with Alice in Hell, and then like it's not like the next song starts out all guns blazing. It kind of starts out a little bit slower and more deliberate. And I have to say, like, in general, I really enjoyed the bass on this album. I got Marcus Grosskopf vibes from the bass work, but I like that it was for an older album. Sometimes bass gets kind of like drowned out in the mix on older albums because mixers, I guess, just weren't focusing as much on bass playing back then. And so, like, especially in the late 80s where there's some like, questionable productions, the bass I thought really shined on this album, and no exception was the beginning of Alice in Hell, where it just opens with a bass solo, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, Charles makes a really good point. The mix is pretty good for an album that was coming out in that kind of a dead period where if you didn't have a big budget, some of this stuff, I think about some of those Manowar albums from the 80s, they just didn't sound so well. But
it's cool because it sounds raw, but at the same time, it sounds clear. And
yes,
it's like raw without sounding muddy and garbled. So I think that really, is the right kind of sound you're looking for this kind of music.
I agree completely. And Alice in Hell is a great tune. It has almost like a vibe of an 80s horror movie soundtrack. Like they could have had it in the background when the killer is like on the loose or something. Like I know that like Nightmare on Elm Street had used Dokken and stuff like that, but they could have used a song like this as well. The riffs are really tight, but to your point, the bass just stands out so well. And there's subtle changes of pace throughout this track, which are fantastic. The verses are kind of tight and in your face. I like this song a lot, and I think it's really well constructed. There's two bands in particular that come to mind when I hear it. The vocals give me that Bobby Blitz of Overkill style. And then all of a sudden, about 3.5 minutes in, maybe a little less, I get King Diamond vibes from this as well, because it's not as thrashy as some of the other stuff on the album. But I think this is a great track, very well constructed.
What did you think of the high pitched vocals from Randy Rampage here? Because I feel like there's more of it on this track than I think on the rest of the album as a whole.
Definitely, and I thought they were really good. I guess that's where I got the King Diamond vibes, because I'm not going to say that about any of the other songs. So this one was just a little bit different than the rest, a little less thrashy and a little more just metal in your face. But again, those bass lines really steal the show on this song.
Yeah, without a doubt. I thought it was a really great way to open things up after that really awesome acoustic guitar long solo, really. So far, so good.
And then we get to track number 3, Welcome to Your Death, affectionately known as WTYD. And this has a really nice cadence as well. The intro actually reminds me a lot of early Megadeth, something that you would hear on Killing Is My Business or something like that. Really powerful riff. The drums are a really nice complement to the riff, and it almost sounds like gunfire in spots, which I thought was kind of cool. And there's a musical interlude where things finally slow down and the band kind of shows off its diversity, but then the guitar solo itself is kind of technical. I think I prefer the opening track, but it's a solid tune, and I would say that what the band does well is it has those technical elements, but it doesn't dilute the songwriting, which is nice, because sometimes when things get too technical, I drop out because it just seems like it's too much. I don't think Annihilator does that on this album, and it's actually better for it.
Yeah, sometimes it's like the musicians might play, technically for the sake of technicality, and it becomes more of like showing off and not so much as constructing the best possible song. And I agree that's not what's going on here. And I like this follow-up too. I think I agree with you. I like Alice in Hell a touch more, but this is solid, and it kind of continues that more closer to like a mid-tempo compared to some of the faster songs that we're going to hear. But this is good. I initially was hoping it stood for Welcome to Your Doom, which is what the bosses in Altered Beast say before you fight them. But, that's okay. We're not going to deduct any points for not meeting ridiculous standards created by my addled and warped brain. So good follow-up to Alice in Hell. I enjoyed this track. Not a bad track on this album, in my opinion.
No, I agree. But you had referenced that kind of in-your-face, faster thrash sound that would be on other tracks. I think Wicked Mystic is a good example of that. What did you think of this next tune? Because this one I think is a little more in-your-face thrash metal.
Yeah, I think it picked up the pace a little bit more. There's more of a chug, if you will, as you chug your water there. I don't know that I think Alice in Hell's still my favorite song up to this point, but I do like that we're at least increasing the tempo a little bit. And I feel like the album gets like progressively heavier as it goes on. And I would argue the last track that Charles referenced, Human Insecticide, might be the heaviest track on the album. And so it's kind of cool that they kind of wrap things up with that. But I kind of felt like the album, not like drastically, but like subtly crescendos in a way that like it gets a little bit more heavy and a little bit more technical as it goes on. And I think this is a kind of a taste of things to come as we move forward.
I think that's a really good point. This one is really kind of a no frills tune in many ways. I love the riff, which leads into the first solo. The first verse is interesting because the vocals are a little bit cleaner, but at the same time, I think it's fair to say that like Randy maintains that uniqueness. He's got a unique quality to his vocals, whether he's doing something a little harsher or something a little bit cleaner, like the beginning here. I don't love the chorus on this song, but I think the verses are solid, and the main guitar solo is just so clean sounding that I really enjoy it. It almost sounds like it's just so easy for Jeff Waters to do these types of solos, and I guess because it is for him, whereas I'm standing here in awe, like how does he get that kind of a sound out of a guitar? It's one of the songs that you kind of can't help but bang your head to, even if it's a little bit vanilla compared to some of the rest.
Yeah, I think I actually like the next track. I believe it has a similar tempo as Wicked Mystic, but burns like a buzzsaw blade. I think it just I thought it was a little bit catchier. I like the guitar soloing, especially right at the beginning of the track. They kind of get right in with the guitar solos. But this one was a little more this one worked for me a little bit more than Wicked Mystic, but I think similar in construction and kind of similar in tempo as well. We're kind of sticking to this a little bit faster than those first full-length tracks, Alice in Hell and Welcome to Your Death. So yeah, I like this one too. I really like the dichotomy of the vocals in that, like, you know, they can go really high, or like they could be really kind of like low and like growly is probably the wrong word, just because when we think of growls, we think of, sorry, what did you say?
I would say raspy is the word.
Yeah, raspy is probably better. Like just like kind of grungy, like just kind of like it's weird because the words I want to use are all like subgenres of other types of music, so it's not describing it the way that I want, but it's like, yeah, you know, just kind of like low and dirty, I guess. You know, like burns like a buzzsaw blade. Like it's almost like kind of like a horror villain or whatever, or John Oliva. You know, there you go. But then like he also can like hit those high notes, like in Alice in Hell. He has a really cool range, and it works, I think, throughout the album.
I happen to be in lockstep with you. I thought Burns Like a Buzzsaw Blade was one of my favorite tracks on the album. It seems, even though the vocals are a little bit raspier or John Oliva-esque, like you mentioned, I think that this song is just a little bit brighter and not as dark, which, given the name of the song, is a bit surprising. But there's really some awesome bass solos. I love the cadence. But the song stays in your face and direct through most of it. I found it to be a really good way to kind of end side A of the album. And there's an instrumental section that really kind of goes off the rails at the end, but like in a really good way. This was one of my favorite songs, as I mentioned. Just a really good thrash tune, but like, again, well constructed.
Well said. I'm with you there.
I'm also a big fan of the next track, Word Salad. I loved this one. This one just felt a little bit different for me. It's the longest song on the album at 5 minutes and 49 seconds. It starts with just that lone guitar sound, and it's a little bit slower paced at the beginning and kind of speeds up as it goes along. Very nice, simple chorus. I thought the bass really complemented the guitars well. And then the middle section kind of serves as a breakdown, almost a breather before what I would call the best instrumental section on the album. Fantastic solos, a bit quirky, but I really liked it because it was one of those songs that just got my toes tapping. And so for that reason, I made Word Salad my song of the week. So I want to give it a listen. I want to come back. I want to hear your thoughts on this banger of a tune. So let's enjoy some Word Salad, shall we?
My brains are closest to destroy. But bomb injection fed is poison, I'm no fool. Take the shot, me said not, I wish I were in school. Cross to my mind, destroyed. But I enter inward, black void. Hatred turned to apathy, let down this dark abyss. Good night farewell, you pay from hell, this world I shall not miss.
listening to the song now and I just can't help but move. There's something about the groove that just catches me. I'm curious about your thoughts on Word Salad.
I like it. It's a good tune. It's definitely the longest track on the album. It apparently was, oddly enough, for the longest track on the album, was the only single that was released.
There's a video and all for it. It was, I think it got some rotation on MTV, if I'm not mistaken.
I wouldn't be surprised because the timing would have been right for something like this. Just another, I think they kind of keep that fast pace going from the previous two tracks. This is a good choice. I'm glad that we chose different songs because I think that it's nice to hear, more than one clip, I guess. But I thought this was solid. I don't really have anything else to add that you didn't already say, but good. Yeah, just a solid tune. I like it.
So we move ahead to track number 7, Schizos Are Never Alone, parts 1 and 2, I should add. And this one comes out of the gate pretty fast. Typical 80s thrash. The first part, I guess, is really an extended instrumental section, which I kind of like a lot. It doesn't really stand out, but I just thought it was a cool way to kind of intro the tune. And then part 2 is a little bit more technical with changes of speed and some standout bass lines. Not my favorite song, but solid.
This was actually something that I had considered for Song of the Week just because I really, really like the beginning of the song. It just comes in flying right off the handle. I love the bass that goes along. That there's just this frantic drum work, great riffs. That like just really fun, thrashy. I'm guessing that is what is considered part 1, and then part 2 is where we get more vocals. I don't know that there's a ton of vocals on this track, but it also is a little less speedy. It kind of slows down to like a more of a mid-paced sound. So it's almost like the best of both worlds from what we've heard on the album up to this point. But the beginning of the song is really killer. I enjoyed that part. The first like minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. I really, really enjoyed that. Not my song of the week because I think there's another song that I liked, like start to finish a bit more, but really just love that thrashy guitar with that frantic bass line that is underneath it. Really cool stuff. I like that a lot.
Well, Charles had mentioned the last track, Human Insecticide. If that's not your track of the week, it has to be the next one, track number 8, Ligea. Is that the one, or are you and Charles in lockstep?
I'm with Charles on this one, although I did like this. I thought that the last 3 tracks were really, really good. Like maybe my highlight of the whole album. I just sometimes when it comes to albums like this that I'm not familiar with, and is a genre that I don't listen to a ton of, like I will start to, if it's too long, get like a little bit fatigued. Whereas on this album, I feel like I did the opposite. There was actually an album that I listened to from 2025 where I started to think, if this album was shorter, I probably would have ranked it higher, but it's almost like it's too long. And because the music is not terribly complicated or nuanced, it didn't need to be as long as it was. I will save that commentary for when we do our year in review album, because I think the album's still going to make my list, but I feel like it may have dropped a few spaces because of that. This album is not that, because I mean, it's not that the entire album is under 40 minutes to begin with. But the fact that I think that the 3 last songs are 3 of the best songs, I think helps. And I was expecting this to have a different title based on the lyrics. I don't know what a Ligea is, but I may as well. It's a short story by Edgar Allan Poe. I'd forgotten that I had read that this song was based on Edgar Allan Poe. It is a short story about an unnamed narrator's obsessive love for his deceased first wife, Ligea. After her death, he marries Lady Rowena, who also falls ill and dies. This guy's got real good luck. The story culminates in a climactic and ambiguous scene where Rowena's body is seemingly resurrected, transforming into the figure of Ligeia, and the story explores themes of love, loss, obsession, and the supernatural, leaving the ending open to interpretation as either a supernatural event or a hallucination caused by the narrator's opium addiction. So, I guess
lots of good stuff here.
Yeah, King Diamond, not the only band that's kind of delving into the macabre, if you will.
There you go.
So yeah, it adds a little more light or darkness, I guess, in this case, to this song. But interesting subject material.
I thought this one was a little bit more technical, and it actually has a bit of a Slayer vibe just due to the speed and the rawness, especially at the beginning. But the vocals remind me a lot of Bobby Blitz and Overkill, so it's kind of a nice mix, I guess, in that sense. A real fast, heavy headbanger of a tune, another great instrumental section, but just a wonderful technical display all around. I like this one as well.
Do you remember when Pat Gravino would just get like a line of a song stuck in his head and he would just repeat it over and over? I remember, I think it was an early Voyager song. I'm gonna probably blank on it, but he would just like grasp onto like just a thing and he would obsess about it. And I could just picture him just jumping in your face and just going, "Air woven divinity, mind stolen victory." Like just very Pat-like.
I could totally see that. There's certain earworms, not necessarily full verses or full choruses, but lines of this album which do that, and that's a really good example.
Yeah, well, I just, for whatever reason, that made me think of our friend Pat. God bless him.
So talk to me about Human Insecticide and why you chose this as your song of the week. It's the closing tune. It is a really in-your-face, fast thrash song, and quite frankly would not have been my first guess, just given your taste. Talk to me. What is it about this song that made it the song of the week?
The beginning of the song, much like the Schizo's song, just starts out like full blast with, again, that like those cool little bass licks, super speedy, thrashy guitars, wild drumming. I just think on a whole, the song from start to finish is better, a little bit more consistent. I think it's a really great way to kind of ride out the album. Of all the things, it reminded me of a band you mentioned earlier. It reminded me of Manowar, the particularly Wheels of Fire, where it just opens up with like this fast as hell guitar, and the vocals are very like staccato-y, like just like really quick and deliberate. And so in a weird way, it reminded me of that song Wheels of Fire by Manowar. I feel like Manowar might have been taking a little bit of a page out of the thrash book, even though that album came out a year before this one. Maybe Annihilator borrowed some Manowar for this track. I highly doubt it, but I just like when I got to the end of the album, I was just kind of like, I probably would have been okay if there was like another track or two. Like I haven't, this thrash sound has not worn out its welcome for me. But that said, I thought that this was a really great song to choose as the last song. I think it's a really well book-ended album with the great Crystal Ann acoustic guitar intro leading into the awesome Alice in Hell, track. I guess is it considered the title track if it's spelled differently than the
That's
title?
a good question. I'm going to say yes, but they definitely went for a different vibe from the album title.
The song is the name Allison and then space Hell, whereas the album title is Alice space in space Hell. So I don't know. We'll let the listeners decide for us. I'm sure somebody in the comments section will mention it, but also, just to put a cap on Human Insecticide before we give it a listen, the end of it just has that that classic like thrash like end of a song live where it's just like instrument banging, but in a kind of nice, pleasing to the ear sort of way.
Tasteful banging,
yeah,
if you will.
Yeah, exactly. PG-13 rated. So yeah, really nice way to end things off. So let's give it a listen. With you there, Charles, Human Insecticide. Just to me, just had the most teeth of any of the songs on the album, and for that reason, because of the I don't know, maybe I'm just like starting to enjoy this music more, but I just find this to be a more palatable type of thrash metal for me. So I'll try to pick a good minute of it to share. But here it is, Human Insecticide.
The way this album started, it almost had to end this way with that all-out blitz, and they do a great job with it. Some of the best guitar work on the album. I'm so happy that both of you kind of chose this because I think it really does represent the climax, or the crescendo was the word you used, of the album. I also give the band credit because there's two genres where I don't need an album to be 65 minutes, black metal and thrash metal. Like both genres, but much like death metal, you don't need an hour album. 35, 40 minutes, you're done and you're on to the next thing. And I thought that the compactness of the album made it a really enjoyable listen. And every time I went back to it, I enjoyed it more than the last. So kudos to Charles for the selection. Kudos to Annihilator for the album. And kudos to you for putting up with it. So I'm glad to hear all of those things. Scale of 1 to 10. What would you give Alice in Hell?
I'm giving it a 7. I liked it. It was on the higher end of the non big four thrash metal albums that we've listened to for sure. Loudwire ranked at number 30 as greatest thrash metal album of all time. One spot behind Megadeth's Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good. So they're in good company, and it's interesting kind of looking at this list and seeing that we've covered a handful of albums on here, including Flotsam and Jetsam's Doomsday for the Deceiver, which is 2 spots ahead of this Annihilator album, and oddly enough was also a request from our friend Charles. So in good company there. There's definitely some bands on here we haven't talked about yet, like Sodom and Destruction and Voivod. So we still have some work to do. But the Suicidal Tendencies, Lights, Camera, Revolution is on this list, which we covered. There's definitely some classic Metallica and Megadeth albums that we need to get to as well. I see Exodus is Bonded by Blood, which we discussed. Anthrax, Among the Living is on this.
Which we have to go back to.
Yeah, we'll see. Ride the Lightning, Rain and Blood, Rust in Peace. So yeah, not too bad for a power and prog heavy podcast. We've done pretty decent in the classic thrash albums, and Charles thankfully helps with the requests for sure. Keeps us honest. In line. Yep, exactly. I think your score is right. It's a 7 for me. I really enjoyed it. Above average album. I can see why this band was put on the map with an album like this. Curious to hear more stuff. I found it interesting that Stu Block, I believe, is now their singer. So they've just gone through many members at this point, but hopefully one day I'll get to see them live. I'm sure it would be quite the show.
and good stuff. Looking forward to some more thrash stuff in the coming weeks and months ahead. Before we get to your album for next week, how about some news? A big tour, or what I'll call a big tour, announced for next summer and fall. Hammerfall touring North America with Evergrey and Elven King. What a hell of a tour package this should prove to be. Starting at Prague Power, September 11th in Atlanta, going all the way to October 8th out in Seattle where they play El Corazon. Several shows for the band. I believe they're even playing Raleigh, your neck of the woods, September 12th, although I don't think you're going to be able to attend. But cool tour package. Not bands that sound anything alike, but 3 bands that will definitely put on a good show.
To be honest with you, if A, I was home, and B, I wasn't seeing all 3 of those bands at Prague Power, I would most certainly be planning on attending this. But I will be neither of those things because I will be at Prague Power seeing those 3 bands when they play Raleigh. I think, is that Sunday or Saturday? I think it's Saturday,
know.
Right?
I think so.
Either way, even if I was home and it was a week later, I don't know that it would have been necessary for me to go because I plan on seeing all 3 of those bands at Prague Power, at least in some amount. So, but cool. It's always cool to see when the bands are planning on being here anyway to tack on a little bit of tour. Interesting combo too. I don't think of Hammerfall and Evergrey as bands that would play together on the same show, but it's a nice, I think, just a nice way to kind of cover both prog and power, and then have a little bit of folk thrown in with our Italian folky friends from Elven King. So cool package. I like it.
They are playing New York City on September 15th, which in and of itself is completely unremarkable. I bring it up because they're playing on a boat, and I have no idea where or what this venue is, but I'm curious. They're literally playing on a boat, and I don't know if it's supposed to circle the city and then they come back and that's the show. I have no idea.
It's 7,000 tons of metal.
Exactly. It's, with the Statue of Liberty in sight. Really, really interesting. Another Canadian thrash band has announced about 8 shows in the States, and that's Voivod, whom you mentioned earlier. They're doing a run of shows in March. They start in Houston at Hell's Heroes, and then they're going to do a bunch of shows ending in Tulsa, Oklahoma, about a week later on March 27th. So good for them. That is a band that I have seen live, and we'll save that story for another day. And finally, Axel Rudy Pell has announced their new album, Ghost Town, due out March 20th of next year. Often not talked about, but remarkably consistent. Axel Rudy Pell just releases good album after good album, and I always enjoy it, even if it doesn't make my year-end list. Just very, very good music, and you know what you get. You just know what it's going to be, and it's going to be enjoyable.
Yeah, they're one of those bands that, like, I remember hearing of right at the beginning of our metal fandom, and I think it was because, Ralph owned a bunch of Axel Rudy Pell discs, which I have to assume were recommended to him by the aforementioned Pat. Not a band I've listened to a ton of over the years, but I was interested to find out that Jeff Scott Soto was their vocalist at one point, and that was why he had played some Axel Rudy Pell songs on his solo tours, and I think he had played at least 1 or 2 when he played at Prague Power for the first time. So, yeah, cool stuff there.
So with that behind us, why don't you tell everyone what you're making me do next week, which I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't know it was going to happen this week.
Yeah, it's been a kind of tradition since the podcast started that we talk about Sabotage in December. It all kind of started with, I think you had chosen the first Trans-Siberian Orchestra album early on in the podcast, and then I decided to to choose Dead Winter Dead as, I think it was really like our first bonus episode ever. It was before Patreon, but we released it on Christmas morning. And so, it was kind of cool to talk about, Christmas Eve Sarajevo, which appeared on both of those albums. It was kind of cool. It was kind of like an early exchange double, if you will, before that was an actual thing.
So you're going to pick Power of the Night.
I toyed with the idea of doing another exchange double this time and doing Sirens and Poets and Madmen, which are the first and last.
Which of the two are we covering?
Neither. I hope you're ready, because we're going to talk about the least enjoyed, least bandied about Sabotage album of all time. You guessed it. It's time to talk about Fight for the Rock. As much as I am excited to talk about Wake of Magellan and Hall of the Mountain King and Sirens and Poets and Madmen and Power of the Night, I kind of wanted to save those since there's only so many Sabotage albums that exist. And so I thought this would be kind of fun, because I remember early on in my Sabotage fandom reading a lot on the internet about, people's thoughts, and somebody wrote a really, really good article. They ranked, not ranked in order, but like gave a star rating essentially to every Sabotage album, I think up to Wake of Magellan at that point. I think it was prior to Poets' release. And I remember it was pretty apologetic about Fight for the Rock. There's some good stuff on here. It's, not a great album for Sabotage standards, but as far as a rock album, it's not terrible. I think it's just because the band kind of chose to go in what they were thinking would be a more marketable, more commercial kind of direction. They did a cover, which is other than covering Greg's Hall of the Mountain King, which was a classical piece, this is a cover of a Bad Company song, and kind of a soft song, if you will. But I'm not gonna lie, there's a couple of songs on this album that I really, really like.
Yeah, when you compare it to Streets, that's the problem. They're a victim of their own success. But I guarantee you it will be an interesting chat.
And you know what? It's an
interesting listen.
It's an important album too, because it really kind of brings the band to the crossroads where after this album is released and panned, that's when the band would bring on Paul O'Neill, and Paul O'Neill would help them craft Hall of the Mountain King. And then, that was almost the beginning of the almost theatrical version of Sabotage. When you go back to Sirens and Power of the Night, that's the almost thrash-like version of Sabotage. It's just more of a in-your-face, straightforward metal band. And then it's with Hall of the Mountain King where I think they start to pick up some of the classical nuances, and with Paul O'Neill, I think there was always kind of a Broadway-esque thing that obviously led to what Trans-Siberian Orchestra would become. But I think Hall of the Mountain King is the beginning of that era, even though it still does have that some of that heaviness from the early era. And then I think once Gutter Ballet and Streets, I think you could tell that they're moving more and more towards a more theatrical direction. I could go on for hours. I'll save that for next week, but I am looking forward to discussing this album. It's one of those albums that when we started the podcast, I was like, I can't wait until we get up to this, because it, much like Chameleon or Pink Bubbles Go 8 for Halloween, some bands, maybe not like Amorphous or Epica, but some bands have an album that people are like, ooh, Falling Into Infinity was one of the first albums we ever covered by Dream Theater. It's just sometimes those albums, always make for the best discussions, and so I think this will be a fun one. There's some stuff on here that I don't even really remember that well, and then there's stuff like Lady in Disguise and Out on the Streets that I think were recorded originally for Sirens, and then they re-recorded them in a almost softer way. This is going to be fun. I'm getting ahead of myself, so I'll stop talking, but I'm excited about this.
An interesting and necessary discussion. And an interesting and necessary listen, if not fantastic. I'll just say that. It is going to be a very interesting chat next week. So thank you. Thanks to all our Patreon members. We appreciate you, and keep the requests coming. We will continue to go through them. Thanks to everyone who is new to the podcast for listening. We appreciate you. Give us a like and a follow if you like what we're doing, and we'll be happy to come back each and every week as we roll on to 300 and beyond. Next week, we fight for the rock. Enjoy the week, my friend. I will talk to you soon.
Oh, and Merry Christmas. And
oh, yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas to all. Happy holidays. It's a fun time of year, and I forgot when this was coming out. Good catch.
Yep. Wanted to make sure we mention that. Maybe we'll have a little Christmas present for all the listeners out there, but it's the least we could do for making them listen to us talk about Fight for the Rock, I guess.
Take care, bud.
Have a good one.